Welcome to the results of my 2018 Machinima contest, which is way overdue. I had a lot of trouble getting the results done this year, partly because a few judges were extremely late with their marks, but I do understand why that is. We had 16 entries this year, some of which went well over an hour, and it's just hard to convince judges to sit through that. And for me, it's really hard to watch the whole thing while also trying to think objectively about what worked and what didn't. So I did my very best to give you guys fair criticism, but there was a lot of material to get through. So there are definitely going to be times where I come across as overly harsh, or times when I flat out miss stuff, and I am sorry. A quick disclaimer before I get started though, I felt it was important to sort of tell you guys what I thought was your most important issue, rather than going super in depth with my criticisms. So for those of you who are paying very close attention, if you see something that I didn't point out, it's because I didn't think that person needed to hear it. And generally what I talk about in this contest is probably what I think is the most important issue for that person. If you ever want to hang out or talk about it, I'm generally always on Discord, so feel free to join my server and message me. I'll post a link to that in the description. Anyways, let's get into it. Starting off at dead last, number 14, No Room Left in Hell Part 1 by Pep. With a total score of minus 1335, minus 69 Lucifers out of 10, rape isn't cool, man. And it's not. Rape is seriously not okay, and Pep just raped us with this horrible machinima. This was so terrible I felt physically ill after watching it. Nothing was done right. Whoever thought up this garbage seriously needs to go die in a hole. Just kidding. Pep submitted this as a joke, but rape still is not cool, man. Number 13, Driving Test by Eliminator 310. I'm gonna be real with you. The setup, the whole driving test thing, is pretty good. Screwing around with cars in Halo can be a lot of fun. The camera work is an issue though. There are some serviceable shots in there, but in my opinion, the camera work is the biggest problem. In all of your shots, there's tons of headroom. I recommend making the shots way closer and eliminating a lot of that empty space above his head. Most shots are extremely wide, and the ones that aren't are questionable. Like this shot of the Warthog running into the camera and glitching out. In these cases, it's really important to sort of analyze your own work and really think about whether or not this is a good shot. The 180-degree rule is broken. In this first shot, the red guy is on the right looking left, then in the next shot he's on the left looking right. That is a very noticeable continuity break. Also, in the same shot, he paused the clip when switching angles and left in the parts when it was paused in theater mode. So there are these choppy still frames. And then you've just got sloppy, lazy sort of stuff like Warthog spawning in the backgrounds of shots. I feel like Eliminator just didn't put in the effort in some places, which I understand, I really do. It's just sometimes you need to watch your own video carefully before posting it, and re-record shots if necessary. Alright, so number 12, Herogameplayz Halloween Special by Herogameplayz. Yeah, Halloween thing, very cool idea. I think the map is great. I visually love the fog. Halo 5 has some unfortunate lighting though, and stuff just looks like shit sometimes, which is probably why people almost exclusively layer in this engine. That being said, problems. Headroom. I brought this up last year, and Herogameplayz still leaves a massive amount of space around his character's head, which he places directly in the center of the screen. You want to move the character's head up and to the side, sort of more like this. Maybe pull the camera in a bit too, but unfortunately I can't really show you that unless I reshoot it myself, which I don't really want to do right now. Continuity issues. The characters often shift between animations or are in completely different positions after switching shots. Body acting and framing. The characters often move erratically when they really shouldn't, and either they move off screen or the camera is just positioned so half a character's face or body is cut off, and it just looks really weird. I should probably point out that when body actors are strafing weirdly, you should really just act it out again and try to get them to stay more still. The jittering never looks good. And what's happening here? It looks like the same shot, but this dude starts to move and then it transitions back to where he was. My guess is that the clip he recorded wasn't long enough, but then he just rolled it back to the beginning but didn't notice this guy started to move. So like I said for the previous entry, it is very important to watch your own videos carefully before posting them so you can catch these kind of mistakes. But yeah, Herogameplayz, if you're watching, please listen to what I'm saying. You're a dedicated machinima director, and you could be really great if you just stop making these mistakes. Number 11. AlphaSquad Episode 1 by RaymondSpy95. This machinima starts off with some pretty nice shots of a warthog driving through breakneck, which did a decent job of setting a more dramatic tone, but from there it totally goes off the rails. First off, I had no idea what was going on in this machinima, which is a problem mostly created by the audio quality.
I need to get to the bottom of these attacks, so I'm able to prevent the next one.
The characters' voices sound like they were recorded on some 2003 Xbox headset mic or something. So, when they aren't subtitled, I actually have trouble understanding them. And to make matters worse, he's making some very odd choices when it comes to voice effects. To start off, some of them are way too strong, and should have either been dialed back or removed entirely. Like, why would Covenant elites have their pitch raised to the level of chipmunks?
Then why aren't we in there with Maricat? Because it's a private meeting. We will know the details later.
I would recommend either picking up a higher quality mic or even using your phone. Most phones can actually take higher quality recordings than what I'm seeing here. Headspace is also a problem. To his credit, Ray does get this right sometimes, but most of the time, there's just way too much empty space around the characters. The shots would look a lot better if you cut a lot of that empty space out. My advice would be to watch real films, look at how they frame their shots and try to emulate that. And finally, the 180-degree rule is broken more or less constantly throughout this machinima, which I have talked about extensively in previous years. It's a problem. Raymond Spy, I'm sorry, man. I do think you have some great stories, but you need to work on how you tell them. Anyways, man, I hope you keep up the hard work, and I hope to see you again next year. You have the potential to be great. You just need to put in the effort and think about what I'm saying. Number 10. Realities Collide by SoulWolfxGaming. It is definitely out of the ordinary to see a Fortnite machinima. Fortnite may have been one of the most popular games at the time, but it was never a popular machinima engine, because the game is just hard to work with. When you consider that drones seem to vacuum up dead bodies almost instantly, and how brightly colored weapons pop out of people when they die. That and a lot of the animations just seem kinda janky and awkward to me. That being said, this machinima exceeded my expectations, because it actually has voice acting and tries to have a story, which is actually really unusual for a Fortnite machinima. For a Fortnite machinima, I think it really stands out because of this. Visually, I think there are some shots that are actually pretty good. Mostly of environments, though. You might have gotten lucky with those. I do appreciate that he is trying to copy over-the-shoulder shots and stuff like that, like you would see in actual films, but the camera work is still a bit off. The 180-degree rule was broken many times. I don't think he fully understands the rule of thirds, because he always puts his main subject directly in the center of the screen. This may work sometimes in certain specific situations, but generally, it's a good idea to shift the camera so your main subjects are off to the side a bit. It's more complicated than that, so I might explain it in a future video. All that said, my biggest issue is that this machinima is light on the story, heavy on the action. Which isn't necessarily a problem, but his camera work during action scenes just goes down the drain. Any effort he put into his camera work during conversations is nowhere to be seen in the action scenes. He essentially just does his best job at following his characters with the free camera in one very long continuous shot, trying to keep them all in frame while they fight it out. And sometimes they do leave the frame and he doesn't bother to reshoot. Generally, it's a good idea to cut between different shots even during action scenes. The camera work isn't the only problem I had with the action scenes though. I thought the body acting also needed work, especially for an action-heavy machinima. Body acting, for those who don't know, is when you actually go to act out the scene in the game. In machinima, you generally want to choreograph everything. You need to have a clear idea of what's going to happen, and you can't just tell your actors to fight each other because stuff like this happens. You need the characters to move in a more cinematic way. In this machinima, characters generally move the way most players do when they play the game. Stuff like jumping and strafing may work great for gameplay, but it comes out looking kinda janky and stupid in a machinima. I can see there were a few times when he tried to choreograph the action scenes and move in a more deliberate way, but even then I feel like it kinda missed its mark. Mostly because of other camera work and editing issues. Like here, where he just didn't bother to cut out the beginning where he's setting up the shot he wants. and the characters are sort of shuffling to stand in the right position. Everything needs to be edited in a way where it flows together seamlessly. I was going to talk about how the music is louder than the dialogue and go into a thing about voice acting, but I feel like I've already gone on for too long about this one. In conclusion, Realities Collide is a good effort, definitely a step above most Fortnite machinimas. But in my opinion, there are just too many small issues that hold it back. Number 9. Earth's End by TAURSII. Earth's End starts off with some pretty cool shots of Breakneck. That and the ODST music does a great job of setting the tone. My biggest issue with this machinima is that there's no real substance here. No dialogue, no story, nothing really happens. The audience kind of has to assume at parts. In terms of shot composition, he generally leaves a bit too much headroom. My advice would be to look into the rule of thirds. The Covenant ship looks all wrong. It's probably something to do with the lighting, but there's even a part when the Covenant ship passes over the assault rifle on the Spartan's back, which looks really weird. To be honest, I wouldn't really know how to do something like this properly, but I've always said that if you can't do it well, just don't. Machinima has always been about working around the limitations of the engine, so you should never try to do something you can't do just because you want to do it. It's always better to write your story so it doesn't require these big VFX set pieces, especially if you aren't sure how to execute them. During the transition to the next scene, the background music transitions very awkwardly, so I'd recommend thinking more carefully about when you cut music. This After Effects particle effect preset is actually so overused. I don't actually know how to use it, and I don't really want to learn. Because, first off, that's not what snow looks like. A lot of people think it is, but it's not. It kind of bothers me. Second, a lot of people use it in environments where it makes no sense. Like here, for instance. Why would there be white particles flying up from the ground in a forested environment? I think it's another one of those instances where people just do it because they can, and it's easy, not because they actually put any real thought into why they should use it. I've seen TAURSII a lot in the VFX chat in the hub, and I appreciate that he's trying to learn VFX, because if you really want to learn, all you can do is keep trying. Since this video, I've seen a lot of great progress from TAURSII, and I hope to see more from him in the future. Number 8. Decisions. A Warlock's Eulogy by Quasar Cinema. This starts off pretty well as an atmospheric machinima with a monologue in the background. Destiny really does have some great environments to make use of, and the voice acting in the monologue is actually really good for what it is. The quality is nice. Probably my biggest gripe is that the camera movements in here are jerky. Sometimes I feel like there are actually random cuts to a very similar shot, breaking the 30-degree rule and sometimes even breaking continuity. In terms of framing, some of the shots are pretty good, but others just don't really work. Quasar Cinema often makes the mistake of placing the character directly in the center of the screen. Wide shots aren't bad, but I'd recommend checking out the rule of thirds to learn how to frame those kind of shots properly. Although what he's doing here is not always bad, going for the center of the screen, generally it's not a good idea to use that with every shot. But yeah, it was very cool to see Destiny 2 machinima. And there is some good stuff in here for sure. Yeah. Number 7. Fred and George Episode 1 by Bad Films Pro. I've got to say it's really cool to see a Halo CE machinima. They're really rare nowadays. Probably because Reach is super popular right now, and it's so much easier to use. But it is still nice to see. And it's not a bad setup for a sitcom sort of show. Although I have to say straight off, the green screen background looks a bit weird. Lots of artifacting, it just doesn't quite look right. So like I was saying before, if you can't do it, just don't. In some of the later shots, some of the scaling is off too. These Spartans look way too small next to that door. The voice actor for the yellow dude, Fred, slurs his words a lot, and he says a lot of the lines very awkwardly.
George, there's a very fine line between forgetting and not remembering. I like to think I walk that line every day of my life.
You have got to be kidding me. I specifically told you to fill up the tank yesterday.
I was thinking about the vast mysteries of the universe.
I mean, I get that his character is supposed to be a bit of an idiot, but sometimes I actually had trouble understanding what he was saying, which is a problem, so maybe dial that back a bit. In some shots, there's no background noise, and there's tons of background noise in other shots.
I'll meet you back here at the Warthog.
Oh my gosh, finally, what took you so long?
There should always be some background noise, and you never want to have sort of a huge disparity between decibel levels of background noise, because it just comes off as kind of awkward. Also, instead of switching between shots, which is what is normally done for conversations, this machinima tends to rely on red versus blue head bobbing to help you identify who's talking. And while it does sort of work, switching between different shots is always better, and will help provide shot variety. General sloppiness is also a problem. Like in this shot, following the Warthog, the camera movement is very jerky, and the Warthog goes off screen for an extended period of time. So really, you should keep doing different takes until it comes out looking good. I realize that the green screen shots probably took a lot of effort, but it didn't come out looking right. So my advice would be to just shoot in the actual game, and avoid using the green screen if you're not sure how to use it properly. That, or just sort of touch up your After Effects or whatever program you're using. Number 6, Lost Altitude by Maumd's Forge. I don't know how to pronounce that. Somebody let me know in the comments if you know how to pronounce that. I feel really bad about it. But yeah, starting off, there are some nice atmospheric shots in this machinima, which do a really good job of setting up that the character is stranded, alone, and in the desert. But I kind of get lost as he approaches the Pelican. It's supposed to transition into a flashback, but I was just confused. It wasn't clear to me that it was a flashback, maybe some kind of video transition, or audio, maybe some kind of different editing would help out with that. But as it is, I just found it confusing until I realized what it was at the end of it. At that point, I was just completely out of the moment. And it's not really thinking about the story. I was like, oh, it's a, you don't want that. Also in the flashback, the shots in the Pelican are green screened, and you can see the green bleeding through in some of the shots. If you don't know how to get rid of all the green, then I recommend just finding a way to shoot it without using VFX, because like I said before, several times, if you can't do it well, just don't. The music is really great. It sort of builds suspense, giving you the impression that you're going to see something horrible in the crashed Pelican. But in the end, we don't see anything, and he just walks away. So I guess my main issue here is that there's nothing really happening. Without any kind of voice work or story developments of any kind, it just feels a bit meaningless. It's just a dude walking around the desert for 5 minutes who then walks around a crashed Pelican. I mean, I get the style he's going for, but I think adding voice actors and trying to build an actual story would really enhance this kind of machinima. Overall though, not bad. Keep up the good work. Number 5, Shroud by JS. I'm not going to go too hard on this one because it actually says in the description that this is actually an unreleased machinima from 2016, and that he's improved since then. So I won't go into it too hard. This machinima generally does a pretty good job of building up suspense, with only a couple of hiccups, in my opinion, with the, like the character bumps into like 3 people, and it's just kind of, it's amusing, but I mean, for the kind of machinima that this is, maybe it's not the best idea. The framing, while generally pretty good, is sometimes a little messed up by the letterbox. In this shot, the top of the character's head is cut off by the letterbox, which looks a bit weird to me. The 180-degree rule is broken quite a few times, which is a big problem for continuity and all that. I could dive into it a bit more, but honestly, just work a bit on your cinematography and your sound design a bit more, and you're good. AyStar had a lot more to say, but I'd recommend reaching out to him to talk about it, because while I don't disagree with what he's saying, it's just really nitpicky in my opinion, especially considering that JS did say in the description of this video that it is an older video, so I feel like it's probably unnecessary anyways. Tied for number 4, Perception by Devault. Let me just say that this is a great first machinima. It's generally very well shot and well executed. Just to nitpick a bit though, there were a couple shots with some sloppy execution. Like this one where the character's head clips over the top of the letterbox. In cases like this, it's important to remember that if you plan to use a letterbox, you should keep that in mind when filming, because it will actually cut off the top and bottom of your shots, which can end up looking really awkward depending on how you framed it. In some shots, there's also some glitching that takes away from the serious tone of the machinima. Voice acting wise, I feel like I can't be objective because I voiced in this, but I feel like there were some takes that probably shouldn't have been used, and some lines that should have been cut. But overall, it's a very good first effort, Definitely better than any of the shit I made in the first few years when I started. I know Devolt is still working on Machinima, and I hope he stays with it because there is certainly a lot of potential here. Also tied for number 4, the legendary Super Spartan by the Salty Gents. This is a pretty jokes Machinima, very lighthearted, doesn't take itself too seriously, and it's based on those Halo matches where your entire team leaves. Except in this Machinima, the one remaining player goes fucking Super Saiyan and takes out the whole team. I love the choice of music too, it's pretty funny. A couple of my other judges had issues with the voice acting, brought up the whole whisper yelling thing, which I think did happen, although that didn't really bother me that much, considering that this is supposed to take place in an actual matchmaking game, so the characters would just be randoms talking over their headsets. So, whisper yelling does kind of happen in those situations. So I think it actually kind of worked for the style the video is going for. The VFX are super over the top, and that's kind of the point, with some of them even looking cartoon-inspired, which really works for the video. If I had to say one thing, it's the goddamn 180-degree rule. Okay, I know I'm becoming a 180-degree rule meme at this point, but everyone keeps breaking it. I mean, generally it's not bad in this Machinima, especially for the kind of video that this is, but this shot really bothered me. So he's on the left looking right, the grenade hits his head, bounces off, and flies right. In the next shot, he's on the right facing left, the grenade is on the left, rotating the opposite way when you compare it to the previous shot. See? It's a massive continuity error. Really what bothers me most here is the rotation of the grenade, not so much the 180-degree rule because we're just dealing with one character. The thing is, a shot like this takes a lot of time to complete. I know, and I really like the depth of field shift in the shot, but the continuity breaks are still bad, no matter how you look at it. And then the icing on the fucking cake is that the body glitches out after the grenade explodes. I don't know if he didn't notice this or if he was just sitting in After Effects and after noticing it he was just like, fuck it. I don't want to reshoot. I'm sorry, man. I mean, it's not a huge deal. It's like a 3-second thing, but yeah. Overall, this video was a lot of fun. Definitely worth the watch, but I will not rest until everyone understands the 180-degree rule. Anyways, great job, man. I really enjoyed the video. Number 3. Endgame by Snap Films. I think Endgame is a really great machinima. Everyone loves how it takes place during a big event in Halo history, but I like it because it's very well written in my opinion. I think it had a lot to say about toxic gaming culture, the heavily performance-based win-at-all-cost mentality that plagues gamers everywhere, and it even sort of addressed the viewpoint of whether or not gaming is a waste of time and why some people just move on. And while it does come off as a bit preachy, it was very well done. In terms of characters, Apache is probably the most well-developed character, and I think the only one who actually changes throughout the story, which is something that you don't really see in Machinima all that much, and it's something that's really important to overall story structure and storytelling in general. So it was really nice to see that. On the other hand, Carver is probably the weakest link, in my opinion, because he only exists to be cartoonishly evil, push the story forward, and frustrate all the other characters. Essentially, he's there just to force Apache to make that change, not to be an actual character with any depth to him. Though, while I think Endgame is a very good machinima, I think it does have some flaws. And these flaws are solely based on the kind of story that it is. Now, while it's generally very well made and very well shot, although there's a couple times when he breaks the 180-degree rule, but it's really not that big a deal, because generally he's pretty good with it. My biggest issue is that it's a very depressing and long-winded story. It's very, very slow-paced. There's a lot of dramatic silences, and I don't know if it's really my place to criticize this, because it really does. The dramatic silences do add to the sort of tone that he's going for, but at the end of the day, it's just a very, very long and very depressing story, and generally one that only hardcore gamers or Halo players can really identify with. While it is a good story, it's the kind of story that you're only going to sit through once, and you're only going to sit through if you're a very specific kind of person. I know I had a tough time motivating myself to rewatch this after I'd watched it previously, and a lot of my judges felt the same way. Particularly, there's a lot of long, depressing silences, and it's just generally a depressing story. Which doesn't make it bad, it's just not the kind of story that people will go back to again and again. Tied for number 2, Defense of Omega Base Alpha Base Battle Remastered by Elite Killer 259. Dude, what is that name, man? What is that name? Anyways, Elite Killer is a great action scene director, and in this machinima he does a great job of creating a tense, chaotic action scene. I'm going to talk about the 180-degree rule again, but in this case, sort of more of a it's not so bad kind of thing. He does break it, but it's one of those situations where it kind of works because it's a very chaotic sort of battle scene. The scene itself is very dynamic. The battle has multiple parts or stages, which he transitions to quickly, preventing the battle from becoming monotonous. It's generally very well shot, although the camera is a bit too shaky for my taste, but really that comes down to preference or directing style more than anything else. And for what he's going for, it couldn't be better. Elite Killer does an amazing job following projectiles, following moving characters, following destroyed vehicles, and he does a lot of camera movement while keeping all of the subjects in the right place, which isn't easy. And I have to say, I really appreciate the fact that we finally got a machinima where elites kick ass. I have seen them get mowed down way too many times. There's really not a lot I have to say that isn't just nitpicking. I know AyStar had some issues with the sloppy body acting or the sound design, which I might talk about in a future video, but overall, this was very well done. I was impressed. Fuck, man, I wish I could do action scenes this good, you know? But, you know, it is what it is. Also tied for number 2, Forge Fight Redux by Leidendal. Alright, first, let me just say, wow. That was awesome. I don't even really want to start talking about the camera work with this one because the body acting was on point. As someone who's tried to do this stuff, there are a lot of stunts. Stunts that must have taken a ton of takes to get right. There's a combination of people playing as monitors, moving stuff around, and then the Spartans navigating through that in addition to well-choreographed action sequences between the Spartans themselves. This must have taken a tremendous amount of coordination to act out, and that should be commended. Even if you put all that aside, you have a machinima that's actually very well shot. The framing and consistency is generally really good, even when it comes down to stuff like the 180-degree rule. When weapons are fired, the projectiles are generally flying the right way, and when he switches between shots, the direction the characters are facing is consistent, which goes a long way in terms of making sure the audience understands everything that's happening. And that's really important in an action scene like this where there's a lot going on. This is definitely a more structured action scene compared to what I normally see, compared to what Elite Killer 259 did in the previous entry, and it really works. It's not better or worse, but it's different. And I appreciate that he did it this way, because I feel like people just tend to default to chaotic action scenes, and there's a lot of merit to structured ones too. People need to understand how much harder camera work is when you're dealing with subjects that are constantly moving. His shots are just wide enough so you can see and understand everything that's happening, and there's a lot happening. His shots are generally very appealing, and while he does use the rule of thirds most of the time, he also knows when to break it to draw attention to things or to create certain feelings within the audience. He follows vehicles very well and uses a lot of circular panning shots which generate a lot of energy. And they fit the situation well. There are even a few creative shots that I thought were pretty cool. That being said, there is not a lot of story or substance in this. It's just a really neat action video, which is definitely worth the watch if you're into that sort of thing. Sound design is an issue, I think. I'm pretty sure he just used the in-game sound effects with music over it, which is a shame because I think this machinima would really benefit from proper sound design. Otherwise, I thought this was really cool, very impressive, well done. While it's true this is just an action scene and there's not a lot of substance there, this is one of those situations where it's style over substance, and the action is just so unique and well done that it really stands out in my opinion. It's just so cool that he did this in the actual game. Alright, now, the winner. Number 1, The Ark Act 1 by Q-Man. Sort of, when I was reviewing this, I sort of reviewed the whole series, as opposed to just doing the first episode, because I feel like I'm just not getting a complete picture, and there were already hour-long entries on the list anyway. If you haven't checked out The Ark yet, it's a really great machinima, and I highly recommend it. Typically, Q-Man does a lot of dark, dramatic type stuff, so I really didn't expect something like this. The Ark is a romance machinima that takes us all the way back to September of 2010, the day Halo Reach was released. It doesn't rely heavily on color grading or other VFX, and its cinematography is kind of meh. I mean, it's not bad, but I don't think it's outstanding either. I mean, he breaks the 180-degree rule almost constantly in Act 2, and he breaks it a bunch more times throughout the series. Rule of Thirds is not bad though. That being said though, the arc isn't great because it's technically great. The arc is great because Q-Man understands that it's all in the story. Q-Man's dialogue was good enough to make a non-cringy romance machinima, which I didn't think was possible. I've been making fun of romance machinimas for the longest time. Just saying the term romance machinima kinda makes me cringe, because I've seen far too many romance machinimas that are just terrible. But Q-Man's writing really carries it. The arc is actually a really great, very well told story about a couple that meets while playing a video game. And I am happy that this won the contest, because in terms of writing a relatable and compelling story, this was very, very well done. I think it definitely deserves all the praise it gets, and it deserves to go down as one of the best machinimas of the late 2010s. I think people need to understand that the script is more important than choreography, VFX, sound design, cinematography, and all that shit, because while I think other entries on this list may have done a better job in those other categories, the story is the most important one. That's something I think machinima directors in general need to think about, because lately, machinima directors have been obsessed with VFX, which honestly are not that important. These days, people are putting no thought into their scripts. They just sort of hobble something together, something full of grammatical errors and awkward sounding dialogue. Then they send it out to guys like me to voice act, and when it comes out sounding weird, they blame me. And for some reason, nobody notices or cares. I've known some directors to spend hours on one 3-second layered shot, just so people can rave in Discord servers about how pretty it looks. And they spend less than half that time writing garbage tier scripts they don't care about. If you're going to write a story that means something. Put your heart into it. Don't just write a story designed to show off your VFX. It's not that VFX are a bad thing really, it's more that people have sort of inflated their importance. And I do truly believe that the story and the script, the dialogue, is probably the thing that people fuck up more than VFX, and something that people don't talk about enough. And again, it's not bad to have a visual style, to want something to look good, but I think looking good should always be secondary to having a well-crafted story. Anyways, that's it for this video. I already posted the video for the 2019 contest, which is last year by now. If you're looking to enter a contest like this, that video's up there. I'll post a link in the description. Anyways, that's it for this video. I'll see you again next time.